In today's video, we're going to continue on with our NHL GM Report Card series. Today, we look at one of the newest teams in the NHL, the Seattle Kraken. Oh, they had a busy offseason with GM Ron Francis and some big decisions to make, especially internally. Today, we're going to analyze the trades, the signings, the drafting, and grade the work of GM Ron Francis, and that's coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're looking at the Seattle Kraken in our NHL GM Report Card series. We're almost through the Pacific Division. We only have a few teams to go in the Central. Then, of course, in the not too distant future here, once the calendar jumps over to September, in the early part, we'll be doing season previews. That'll be the next series, so stay tuned for that. For now, we continue to grade the work of the GMs and their off-season stuff. So let's take a look at trades, followed by signings. We'll talk a bit about drafting. He also had to hire a new coach as well. So in the GM, Ron Francis only had one trade this offseason, and it wasn't really a huge deal. They traded veteran defenseman Brian Dumoulin to the Anaheim Ducks for a 4th-round pick. Dumoulin was at a point in his career they thought they could move on and they could make the decor a little bit better. Obviously, they had their eyes set on free agency to bring in at least one top guy, which they were able to do, and that made Dumoulin expendable. They get a 4th-round pick for their efforts. I don't have any issues with the trade whatsoever. I think that was a decent bit of business there for Francis and the Seattle Kraken. So that's the only trade we saw involving players this offseason. Looking at their signings, we saw some interesting moves, and some I like and some I don't like. They get a bunch of young players signed to their entry-level contracts. We'll start with that. A bunch of contracts done here for recent draftees from the 24 draft and some from before, including Berkeley Catton, Kim Saarinen, Caden Price, Carson Rykoff, Victor Ostman, and Oscar Fisker-Molgaard. So, lots of these guys that are signed. Obviously, the ELCs are the easiest contract to take care of, but at least they got a lot of their top guys signed. So there's no issues there. Berkeley Catton looks like he could be especially the biggest, most offensive player in this group. Be curious to see when he makes it to the NHL, how impactful he will be. So, of course, he was their top pick in the draft this year as well. So I think they had an okay draft. They get a bunch of young guys and prospects looked after with their ELCs. And internally, though, they had a big decision to make on their first ever pick, number 2 overall, Matty Beniers, who completed his ELC. They signed him to a 7-year contract at $7.142 million, just shy of $50 million after, really a down season. His first full year, he got Rookie of the Year, had a really solid rookie campaign. Last year, there was some regression in his game. He did take a step back, but the whole team did, really. It wasn't just Beniers. Pretty much the bulk of the team regressed in their efforts. Like I said, the year before, when they had a 100-point-plus campaign, made the playoffs, won a round. In year 2, they were surprising everybody. In all honesty, I looking at those numbers, I said numerous times here that it was like the perfect storm of everything going right. And it wasn't going to take a lot for them to be a prime candidate as a team to regress. They had so many players hitting career high shooting percentages and career high totals that it was impossible to expect all those players to keep it up. You take even half of them keep it up and half of them don't, you're going to see regression. It was just the writing was on the wall and was the most obvious team in the NHL that year that it wasn't going to be sustainable. Beniers was one of those players who took a step back. It wasn't huge though. It's not like he completely fell off or had a massive sophomore jinx or anything like that, but Beniers did regress. They opted to go long-term big money anyway. 7 years at 7.142. So, in some ways, I like the contract. Other ways, I wonder if they should have gone with a bridge deal. I think, from the player's perspective, I might have went bridge just because I would hopefully be confident enough to know that last year wasn't the best I can be, and that maybe if I take a 1 or 2 year deal, as the cap continues to rise and I continue to improve my abilities, I could really cash in for a lot more money at that point. But some players prefer to have that security, which is obviously what he went for. From the team perspective, if he meets expectations and continues to improve, this could be a good contract in a year or 2 time. But for right now, it's borderline a little bit much. But like I said, a lot of these deals coming out of the ELCs, we're seeing more RFAs get the big deal right off. I just would have liked to have seen Beniers put up some bigger point totals first. But like I said, he is a rookie of the year 2 years ago. Pretty mature, responsible game. So there's lots to like, and there's lots of reasons to think he will long-term be the team's number one center. So it's a pretty good bet. I totally would have been okay going bridge here too. They do go bridge with a guy like Eeli Tolvanen. No big surprise there. Tolvanen gets a deal of $3.47 million. Tolvanen struggled to find his game with Nashville, but after getting picked up by Seattle, he's slowly gotten better and really taken off. So to get a 2-year deal for him, that kind of money seems reasonable. I'm happy to see Tolvanen finding his game. And of course, veteran Max McCormick, who's mostly a minor leaguer, brought back as well on a 2-year deal at league minimum, 2-way contract. Externally, they did some big spending, which was surprising because it kind of goes against the motif of Ron Francis, and it was very much out of character for him. But they went big on Brandon Montour, giving him basically the same contract as Beniers, 7 years at $7.14 million. I like Brandon Montour. I do have concerns on the contract. Based on how he played 2 years ago with Florida, he looked like he was becoming a stud defenseman and was phenomenal. Then he had a major surgery, and last year he didn't look quite the same. By the end of the year, he wasn't even on power play one that was being run by Oliver Ekman-Larsson through a big chunk of the playoffs. I hope Montour can bounce back, but if that injury took more out of him than we want to realize, I do think that it could prove to be problematic. Now, if he plays like he did, not so much last year, but the year before, especially with Florida in the playoffs that year, like he was a phenomenal guy. So if he plays like that, this is going to be a great contract, and they're going to be getting a lot more offense from the back end and be a much better team for it. But if it's more like last year, our most recent body work to go by, I like Montour still. It's not going to be terrible, but I don't know if it's going to be as good as some people think. I do have some concerns that the injury took more out of him than a lot of people want to realize. Chandler Stevenson, 7 years at $6.25 million. That is a massive overpayment. You have to understand that everybody that plays with Mark Stone is made better. Stone makes everybody better. This is a clear definition of the Stone effect, in my opinion. I like Stevenson. He's a great skater, good two-way centerman. He always played higher in the lineup with Vegas than I really thought he should, but he just seemed to fit well with Stone, and that seemed to be a big part of it. To get 7 years and over $6 million for Stevenson, wow, I am shocked. Because in all honesty, he's going to be a number 2 or number 3 center, right? And he's being paid as so, but I don't know. Especially, don't you hope if you're Seattle that Shane Wright becomes your number 2 center? He had a good flurry of activity with the Kraken towards the end of the year and get to play more top 6 minutes when he was in the lineup with more offensive players, and he was producing. Do you not see Beniers and Wright being your top 2 centermen? And then you like Stevenson to make $6 million to play in your third line doesn't make any sense, right? And you still got Yanni Gourde as well. So that contract to me makes no sense. It's way too much money, and it's completely out of character for Ron Francis. I do not like that contract for Seattle at all. They also signed Mitchell Stevens, 2 years at league minimum. Josh Mahura, depth defenseman, at 1 year at league minimum as well. So summarizing the addition, subtraction, the in and out part of this video, coming in, you got some pretty heavy hitters here contract-wise with Brandon Montour, Chandler Stevenson, and Mitchell Stevens and Josh Mahura. And going out, Brian Dumoulin, who was traded. Justin Schultz was not retained. Tomas Tatar, Kailer Yamamoto was not retained. Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, of course, not retained as well. And goalie Chris Driedger, who also left and ended up back in Florida. So, did they lose anything substantial? Not really. A couple of veterans and Schultz and Dumoulin go out. You bring in a guy like Riker Evans, who's going to get more of an opportunity. You bring in Montour. So the blue line, you can make an argument, is probably going to be the same or better. And a lot largely depends on what you get out of Montour. Your 6 defensemen in your lineup, you're probably going to be Dunn, Larson, Alexiak, Montour, Evans, Borgen, probably. Some talk about the future of Adam Larson. I mean, he may not be there long. It's hard to say. Up front, you're looking at Beniers, Eberle, McCann, Schwartz, Stevenson, Burakovsky, perhaps. Is Wright going to be pushed down to the bottom 6 and not produce again? Because you got Gourde, Bjorkstrand, Tolvanen, and it could be a third line, leaving Wright to play in the 4th with Cartier and Tanev. I don't know. I don't see it. But if you put Shane Wright in the top 6, who are you going to take out? Are you going to put him on the wing and bump either Schwartz or Burakovsky down? Because Eberle and McCann probably won't be bumped down. It's kind of odd to me. I honestly think they would have been better off to add somewhere else. I really don't know that the Stevenson contract, to me, it blocks Wright, and it just doesn't make sense to pay somebody, even if Wright becomes your number 2 center, to pay Stevenson that much to play lower in the lineup. I don't know. I mean, it's really confusing. Really, really confusing. Of course, they hired new head coach Dan Bylsma, who was the coach at Coachella Valley and the American Hockey League affiliate. He's done a great job there the past few years. He has previous NHL experience, of course, with the Penguins as well, Stanley Cup experience. So I think they made the right move. Internally, he knows some of the young players on the roster that came through Coachella Valley. He knows that there's going to be more coming, and so as they come, he'll be familiar with some of the new faces. So there's that. I think Bylsma was an easy fit here as they changed the coaches. So, like I said, the Stevenson contract, to me, is bad from day one. Montour comes with a fair bit of risk just because of, like I said, what I saw last year. I don't know that I would love him as much to give him that long-term deal. The coaching was good. To me, you're kind of blocking right. I'm not really sure what they're doing there. And I would have considered bridging Beniers after the regression from last year. Defensively speaking, they might not be better, but they're going to get more offense, I think, from the back end. The forward group, I mean, it's hard to say, really. Are they better? I maybe, but not a lot. I mean, really, like, you get a lot of the same faces, right? You take out guys like Bellemare, Yamamoto, Tatar, you plug in Stevenson, and that's about it. Hopefully Wright can get a bigger role. So, like, they're about the same on the forward group. There's not really anything there that really moves the needle. Same with, and in the back end, Montour, if he can play the way, like, to his absolute best, your D-core could be better. And goaltending wise it's about the same, but they're going to have to rely on Joey Daccord, I think, to outplay Grubauer again. So all in all, I don't really like the work of Ron Francis as a whole. I'm going to give him a grade of a C-. I'm not a fan of the UFA stuff, and I just don't think that they really brought in anything that's really going to move the needle. Montour's the only possibility, but I do wonder, like I said, how much his bite was taken out of him by that significant shoulder injury that he suffered on their long run when they didn't win the Stanley Cup 2 years ago. Let me know what you think on the Seattle Kraken. Did Ron Francis spend money recklessly for the first time ever? He's typically a very conservative GM, but a lot of these contracts to me don't make sense, and they need to allow more opportunity for some of the youth to get bigger roles, especially Shane Wright, or that pick could turn into bust mode and they're going to end up giving him away for a cheap price or something to get him a fresh start somewhere else. Let me know what you think on the Seattle offseason and the work of GM Ron Francis in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time.